This episode of Moontower Business is brought to you by your local State Farm agent, Alejandra de la Torre. Alejandra's team has amazing customer service, knowledgeable staff, and super competitive pricing. They also have a very convenient location in Round Rock, located at 2200 North A.W. Grimes Boulevard, Suite 500. Alejandra's team is bilingual, and they have over 52 years of combined experience in the insurance industry. Alejandra's team is very friendly and helpful, and they always go the extra mile. They even have after-hours emergency availability. So please call Alejandra's State Farm team for all of your insurance needs, whether it's auto, home, life, or business. Their telephone number is 512-244-3311, or you can see their website at www.alexdelatorre.net. Welcome back to everybody to the Moontower Business Podcast. Today we're speaking with Carlos Cascos, who was the 110th Texas Secretary of State. He also has a CPA firm down in Brownsville, Texas. And welcome on board to the Moontower Business Podcast. Carlos, how are you?
Mr. Obel, thank you so much for having me this morning. You may not want to be called Mr., but out of respect, I'll call you Mr. or I'll just call you Joseph, whichever one is right.
Whatever you prefer.
Either one.
Mr. Cascos, tell us a little bit about your experience as Texas Secretary of State.
Well, as you may know, I've been involved in politics over the last 20 some odd years in different capacities. I've served as a county commissioner in Cameron for 12 years. I was elected county judge as a Republican in Cameron 3 times, with the last one in 2014. I served on the Department of Public Safety Commission. I was a Rick Perry appointment. I was a Democrat at the time, but Rick Perry chose to appoint me to the DPS Commission. I've served on numerous statewide boards under TxDOT, but SOS was to me at the time was the pinnacle of all appointments, and I was honored to be chosen by Abbott as his first appointment. It was kind of a bittersweet appointment. One, I had just gotten reelected as county judge, and so the challenge was trying to explain to constituents that worked so hard to get me reelected, letting them know that I was going to leave. But I believe that it would have served a bigger purpose, not necessarily for me, but for the region as well, which is the Valley, South Texas, and hadn't had an SOS out of Cameron, since Tony Garza was many, many years ago. The irony of it is Tony was my neighbor down the street for many years. He was also a county judge. And so the street that I live on has had 5 county judges live on that street. And all on that, and the last, probably the last 60 years of county judges in Cameron lived on West Levy. So that's kind of a historical, backdrop. But anyway, as Secretary of State, what I was told by other secretaries was, you make of it what you want. And so I made a deliberate choice of a couple of things. Number one, stay in Texas. I believed that smarter people than me can go to China and to Ireland and do all these exotic trips overseas. I chose to stay in Texas, Mexico, and Canada. I went to Mexico 5 times. I went to Canada once. I visited about 142 cities in Texas, different cities, in my 2-year term as secretary. I learned a lot from a lot of different people, different regions. But what I did find interesting was the challenges that every community had were no different. The challenges, whether you're in San Angelo or Amarillo, Lubbock, or, the Houston, Sugar Land, all these, they all had similar challenges. They wanted to know what is it that we can, how can we make our community great? How can we attract entrepreneurs? How can we attract business? What is it that we need to be doing to appeal to industries of different kinds? And so I learned a lot, and I would give my 2 cents for advice, not get a penny back in change. And what I would suggest to people is, look, a community can't be all things to all people. They got to find their niche. What is it that they excel in? What is it that they have to offer? Do they what's their labor force look like? What's their educational system looks like? Their infrastructure, the quality of healthcare, things. That's what industries I found are looking for, and they want. It's like I had a chance to visit the Toyota plant in San Antonio, and so I asked the question: why is it that you all aren't? Why didn't y'all go to the Amazon? I went to several Amazon fulfillment centers, and the one I went to, the one close to Dallas, they had one in San Marcos. What is it that you're looking for? And the number one thing was a workforce. So when you have these large industries like the Toyota plant, like Amazon, they want to go into a region where they can hire 1,000, 2,000 people, within a week's time. And there's very few areas in our state that can offer that. You come down to the valley, in time, we might be able to provide, 2,000, 3,000 workers, but it's going to take a little bit more time. These plants are going to open up. They want to open up. They want a quick labor force. So that's what I would advise clients. Mexico hadn't been visited in, I want to say, 8 to 11 years. But before I got there, the water debt was at an all-time high. The one thing that the Governor Abbott asked, I said, look, we need to reinforce our relationship with Mexico. Easier said than done. First, I had to learn about the relationship that Texas has with Mexico. So the number one point is Mexico is Texas's largest trading partner. 500,000 jobs in Texas are created because of direct trade with Mexico. A lot of people didn't know that as I traveled to Dallas or Wichita, or Nacogdoches, and, give these speeches to people about the importance that Mexico has. So that was number one, nurturing that relationship. As you or you may not know, Mexicans are very high maintenance. I can say that because I'm a Mexican, but they want to be treated a certain way, and many times, you can get more accomplished with certain factions over dinner, over an adult beverage, and talk shop than you can in a boardroom, than you can in an official office. Because once you break bread with somebody, it takes it to a whole different level. Now you're sharing a meal. And with a Hispanic community, especially dealing in Mexico, that's very important to them. So having said that, having Texas and Mexico having the relationship that it does, what I recommended to the governor, I said, Mexico's got to be your first stop outside of Texas. That's going to be your first stop. So he did. After a while, he did. We went. I'd already gone in April. I kind of set the foundation, kind of met some of the movers and shakers of Mexican politics, opened the door for Governor Abbott. He was welcomed. My God, the Messiah. I mean, everybody really looked up to him. They liked him. He came across very, very well. We met with the president of Mexico. I met with a lot of cabinet members to talk about energy reform. We talked a little bit about immigration, but not a whole lot. And I remember meeting with before Abbott went, right after Abbott went, met with Mexico's equivalent to their Secretary of State, who later him and I got to be good friends. He ran for president under the PRI ticket. He didn't prevail, but we got to be good friends. And so it was after. And then when I went to go visit with him, he wanted to talk about all kinds of things: immigration, trade, border security, etc. So what I basically told him was, look, we need to speak about things that are going to bring us together and things that we have in common, not issues that are beyond our help and are going to polarize us. He agreed. So it was over dinner. And the meeting with him went very, very well. There was a lot of agreements that Abbott signed at the time talking about infrastructure. Why is Mexican infrastructure so important to Texas and U.S. trade? Very simple. We can build all the international bridges that we want along the border, whether it's from here to California. But if we don't have the infrastructure leading to or leading from those bridges, it's going to create bottlenecks. It accomplishes nothing. So it's a lot easier for us to build highways and byways leading up from the major metropolitan areas in Texas to our border, but Mexico has to do the same thing along their border. They got to build. They got to build infrastructure. So that was the discussions that we had. Security was an issue that I got to speak with the governor of Nuevo León. And we got to be, somewhat of friends. And that's what it's all about. It's developing relationships. So I went to Mexico 5 times, 3 to Mexico City, once to Ciudad Victoria, and once to Monterrey. And I tell you what's a big benefit. The benefit is obviously speaking the Spanish language. I may not be the best Spanish speaker in the world, but I'm a lot better than a lot. I was born, in Mexico. I was born in Matamoros and immigrated as a young child. Learned the English language, went to public schools, but I always wanted to maintain that Spanish language because it was going to come, to help out at some point, and it did. So when Abbott and I went in Labor, as a matter of fact, it was Labor Day 2015. So it's 5 years ago, almost to the day that we went, and we got to visit with Peña Nieto. Very good meeting. There was translators, obviously, because Governor Abbott's Spanish is not that good, and Peña Nieto's English was not that good. So there were translators, but it was a very productive meeting. Unfortunately, I don't believe that the governor's been back, to Mexico since then. I may be wrong, but I think he's not. Those relationships, especially now with the politics that's going on, it's imperative that Texas continues that outreach, reaching out to the new president, of Mexico, reaching out to the governors of our border states, because, like as I prefaced earlier, Mexico is and will be for quite some time our largest trading partner. And when you have 500,000 jobs depending on Mexican trade in Texas alone, that's relevant. Throughout the United States, there's over I don't know about today, but back before we had the unemployment issues, there was over 6 million jobs in the United States that relied on direct trade with Mexico. Every state in the United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, Rhode Island, Wyoming, you name the state, and they can tell you, and you can see that they have jobs created because of our trade with Mexico. But the SOS position was very informative to me. I spent a lot of time on the road. That was during the 2016 election. I traveled a lot promoting Vote Texas, getting people out to vote. At that time, we had more registered voters in the history of Texas. And that was the idea. Because it's a nonpartisan position, being secretary. It's also the chief elections officer of the state. I went to go speak to Republican clubs, Democrat clubs, vegetarian clubs. It didn't matter. I would go anywhere I was invited to go and speak, and kept the partisan politics out. And I think it was pretty successful. I had a lot of good comments. I gave over 200 speeches in those 2 years. But it's very tiring. It was very tiring. You're on the road, 3-4 days out of the week. I tell you, one time I woke up and I had to actually look out my hotel window because I didn't remember where I was.
Wow.
Yeah. And people said, really? I said, yeah, just like, where am I today? And it was once when I did a stretch from San Angelo, Odessa, Midland, Lubbock, Amarillo, Dallas, and back to Austin. It was rough. And at one point, but you do get to savor a lot of good meals. There's a lot of great people in Texas. But as I traveled, I realized how many Texans know very little about Texas.
Right.
We just don't study it. I would wear bolo ties, right? And that was my trademark. And so I would ask somewhere, I said, what is the official tie of Texas? Nobody knew. It's the bolo tie,
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, for all the Aggie fans, what is the official big, large mammal of Texas?
I don't know.
The longhorn.
Ah.
Duh. Hello. And the small mammal, it was the armadillo. Anyway, so we want to, kind of questions like that about things. But I got to speak to groups as small as 10. And as large as 1,500 to 2,000 people at speeches. I was in Port Lavaca once to go speak at a Rotary Club, I believe, and everywhere I went, it was really it was pretty crowded. And I had a reporter from Corpus drive to Port Lavaca, and basically a young reporter, and he asked me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, why are you here?" Port Lavaca. And I said, I see every community in Texas as a spoke on a wheel. You need them all in order for that wheel to turn properly. And Port Lavaca is no different than Lucas, Texas. People have never heard of Lucas, Texas. It was a small community outside of Dallas that I went to go speak to some seniors about voting. So I went to communities that you've never heard of. Never heard of them. I'd never heard of them. I got police escorts from as soon as I got into the city limits, and the escort was 2 blocks. That's how small the community was. But I was there. I was there to go speak. But that was great. It was a great experience for me. I got to meet a lot of good people in the legislature, and some not so good people in the legislature. But for the most part, I learned that Democrats and Republicans, they all want the same thing. It's the roads that they travel to get there that are a little bit different, but they all want the same thing. Good, they want good things for Texas. They want everyone, to prevail, entrepreneurial development. I found that it's just that the roads that they travel may be slightly different than what everybody else does.
In terms of elections, what did you see was the issue for people signing up to vote and getting out there? I know there's some reluctance sometimes to get out there, and I know it's getting better over time, but what do you think the big concern is for people not signing up and going to vote? Cynicism,
mistrust. All politicians are the same. When like we're having the issue with the riots and some of the atrocities that have been committed against African American men and when all this was going on, I think Trump put it the right way, and I've heard a lot of people use this. There's bad apples everywhere, and to blame a whole career, a whole profession of law enforcement officers on the bad deeds of a handful of people is not fair. It's not right. I was on the DPS commission, and I was there for over 2 years, and I couldn't find a better group of law enforcement people. Are you going to have your bad seeds? You are, but you're going to have that in the accounting profession. And almost in every profession, you're going to have folks that do something that's illegal, unethical, whatever. You're going to have it. But to blame, there's 800 officers in where Mr. Floyd got killed or was murdered, basically, and 4 people out of the 800 committed this atrocious crime. But yet the riots and everything were against all law enforcement personnel. That's not right. Obviously it's not right. I'm not a supporter of defunding. I think it's going to take a lot. I think it's going to take a lot more than words. And even though people say words matter, well, actions matter a lot more than words. No one has a plan as to how to address this at the national level. So you got to start at the local level. You got to start with local law enforcement officers with the proper education, with the training, color blindness, etc. And even after we do all that, we're still going to have issues with some people that you can't cure. That's just the way it is. Is there systemic racism? Does it exist? Yeah, obviously it does. But is it prevalent? Is it prevalent in every law enforcement agency? I don't believe that. But there's some people that are just adamant to believe, and I hope that we do find a mechanism and a philosophy that treats everyone fairly, that everyone is equal, and let's hope it happens, sooner than later.
Right. So your office also handled registration of companies that were getting started, incorporating LLCs, et cetera, trademarks. In your time as Secretary of State, did you experience? I know Austin has a big tech sector, and over time, a lot of different companies have been moving to the state of Texas, to Austin. Were you able to experience big companies or tech companies coming from California to Texas to Austin?
Oh yeah. The way we do business today is different than what we were doing 6 months ago. We have to adapt to this new way of doing things. Texas, and I said this, and this Governor Perry started this, and I think a lot of people alluded to the term, the Texas miracle. I'm sure you've heard it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And my thought was, this wasn't a miracle. This was a very well-defined plan as to how to attract entrepreneurial investment and new businesses. Okay. So it wasn't a miracle. It was well-defined. Governor Perry basically started this, and Governor Abbott continued it, and so this was not anything that was somewhat, coming from a higher being. It was coming with Texas having a plan. Now, I was in Canada trying to convince a Canadian company that had a satellite operations in Montreal. Their base of operations was California. And I spoke with him at length about coming to Texas. I lost track. I don't know if he did or not, but their stock was publicly traded. Anyway, two things that Texas has to offer, two basic things. One, it's a right to work state, and there is no state income tax for individuals. We have a franchise tax that is paid. First $1 million plus of revenue is basically, if you have that revenue or less, I'm not talking about net revenue, about gross revenue, you file, but there's no tax. So it's a very, very small tax that you got to pay at the corporate level. Anybody that files a franchise would be subject to this, but it's nominal. So that's the basic thing that we have to offer. We have a great labor force. And Austin was now known as Silicon Valley. I mean, I'm sorry, it was Silicon. I'll tell you what it is if it comes to me. Silicon Valley, Silicon Hills. We had some phrase for Austin being the new Silicon area of Texas. But the problem is that, Texas grew so fast that the infrastructure can't keep up. Get on I-35 between New Braunfels and Georgetown at 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon, and right when you get out of Buda and, try to make it, try to drive that 20-mile stretch in 30 minutes during peak hour. You're stuck for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we didn't develop that. So Texas had to come up with a plan. There's 21 choke points in the United States. That means where traffic becomes a parking lot. You don't move. Well, Texas has 5 of those choke points. I-35, it's one of them. Then you have others by the Houston area, Dallas, but I-35 is the one that you and I probably would travel almost on a regular basis when you had to, right? When I was secretary, I lived about 10 miles away. I had to leave at 6:45 in the morning to get to the Capitol. I'd get there about 7:15, 7:30 because there's no traffic. If I left at 7:30 or 8, I wouldn't get to the Capitol till 9. And I'm a morning person. I get to my office at 7:30 in the morning every day. That's when I function the best, or I'd like to think I function the best. But that's what I offered to this Canadian company, and I used the Geico commercial as an example. I said, if you move to Texas, you're going to save 15% or more. So,
I like it.
Yeah. So the guy kind of chuckles. And what do you mean? Because we don't have a state income tax. Okay. Now use that frequently, because it's true. So as long as we keep state income taxes away, we're going to continue with people coming to Texas. But with growth comes a lot of responsibility, and that is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place. When you have more people coming in, we may have to invest in our educational system, in schools, infrastructure, healthcare, and with that, unfortunately, you got to pay for that. There's no other way to do it. But I think that Texas is still. I would say this: if I'm in a community, I would ask some questions, and the audience would answer. Do you believe you live in the best community in Texas? And 99% of people, yeah, we do. Okay. Do you believe we live in the best state in the United States? Yeah, right. Do you believe the United States is the best country in the world? Everybody said, well, yeah. So that means that where you live right now is the best place to live in the world. Everybody kind of like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So in order to sell Texas, you got to know Texas. And you obviously you can't sell unless you know what you're selling. So I got some very, very good responses from people outside of the state. Mexico was one of those countries that I visited quite frequently to convince them. Now, we all know the issues with security driving the highways in Mexico. So I suggested, and the governor of both governors have done it. But I said, if you want to get your goods and services from your hometown, whether it's Monterrey, Ciudad Victoria, or Mexico City, you got to provide security for these 18-wheelers and for people that are traveling back and forth. The one issue that no one wanted to talk about in Mexico is how much of their tourism has suffered because of the violence.
Right.
And the example that I gave them in Monterrey, I know people used to love going to Monterrey to go get their eyes checked, to go whatever. I said, people don't want to come. People cannot afford to hop on a plane. If you have a family of 4, hop on a plane and fly to Monterrey or Mexico City, you're spending $1,200 on airfare, where before it cost you $50 in gas to get there. So I said, people are going to be reluctant to travel your highways unless they feel safe and secure. So last year, 2 years ago, they started providing additional military on their highways to safeguard people driving back and forth. Are things going to happen still? Probably. I'm sure they are. But they need to do everything they can to mitigate that violence or mitigate that threat of driving on our Mexican highways.
Mexico has several consulates in Texas. Did you ever have any contact with the Consul Generals in Texas? In your
I met them all.
Yeah,
I've met quite a few. I actually did socialize with the consulate from Mexico, Carlos Gonzalez, and then also with the Consulate General from Ireland.
Okay.
I forgot his name off the guy. Yeah, I used to take him to a place I used to go to. I used to frequent whenever I got a chance on Wednesday nights to go watch the Spasmatics. Yep. And yeah, they used to play on Cedar Street every Wednesday night. And so whenever I'd met somebody like that, I'd invite them, and they loved it. As a matter of fact, I took the county judge from Laredo there one time, Tano Tijerina. Hope he's not watching, but anyway, I took him there. He loved them. And so he had a fundraiser for him some years back where he invited the Spasmatics to come and play. So I'm on record at a TxDOT meeting where I went to go testify, and somebody at the TxDOT meeting said something about me being at the Spasmatics concert on Wednesday, and I said yes. And Ted Houghton was the chairman, and he says, well, I think I was county judge at the time. He says, Judge, you are now on record with TxDOT that you went to go watch the Spasmatics last night. And I said, yeah, I do it all the time. But yeah, I haven't stayed in contact with the consulates. Houston's got more consulates than I believe anywhere, obviously in Texas. I think they got 12 in Houston alone. And I think Texas has quite a few. So yeah, I've had dinner with a lot of them. And I've gotten to meet a lot of it's a ceremonial position. It's a position of honor. Not anybody can be a consulate. but they are political appointments, and so a lot of them have been around for quite some time. Good people, though. I can tell you, I really enjoyed meeting a lot of them.
Good stuff. So we're dealing with obviously the COVID-19 pandemic globally, and we're dealing with it here in Texas. You were Cameron County judge, I think 2007 and 2015, and you had to deal with a pandemic as county judge. Can you kind of talk about your experience dealing with the pandemic before and kind of your thoughts on how we're dealing with the pandemic today?
Back, if I recall, it was H1N1. That was a pandemic back then. It also it destroyed a lot of families. A lot of people passed away in Texas and throughout the country. But we dealt with it. We developed protocols, and but nothing shut down. We kept going. Businesses were open. I think we've done a much better job with COVID in terms of educating folks than we did with H1N1. But it's a different kind of virus. I don't believe, and I'm probably going to get grief for it, but so be it. I don't believe that shutting down for the length of time that we did, the whole economy was wise. I believe that obviously schools, should have been closed and not go back yet until we determine that it's safe to go back. But to shutting down everybody, leaving essential businesses open without a clear definition as to what an essential business is. I'm an entrepreneur guy like everybody else is, and every business is essential to somebody, but more so for the employees that work there. So I wasn't a big supporter. I honored it, but I wasn't a big supporter of shutting everything down the way it was done. And I think in hindsight, I think people may think, we probably should not have done that quite. I think, but bringing down the restaurants to 50% capacity, that's fine. Closing areas that you cannot physically distance. You cannot go to a nightclub or a bar and expect to physically distance. That's just not the nature of that environment, right? A restaurant you can set up. You can set up tables that are 6 feet apart. You can, all this kind of stuff. But in there's certain industries that you just cannot do that. And so, it's a tough, I think it's somewhat been mishandled in a lot of different areas. Here in Cameron, the county shut down beaches, but the city of South Padre Island kept them open. So all you had was people that would have ordinarily gone to a county beach, flooded the city. And the city developed protocols where they actually staked out distance markers where, somebody could set up a little tent, 20, 30 feet apart, no more than 10 people, 6 people could congregate. They had law enforcement drive up and down the beach and make sure that people were doing what they were supposed to be doing, which was staying apart, not having 3 or 4 tents together with 30 people. South Padre Island did it the right way. The county, I think, was closing the beaches down without really giving it any thought. There's enough room out there where they could have distanced people. They could have controlled, accesses. We could have had our park rangers, constables, deputies, drive up and down on mini cycles and making sure that people were adhering to the rule. 20 feet, 30 feet apart. My God, the beach is 5-10 miles long. Easily, you could have accommodated those things. So right now, there's petitions going on at the county level, really asking the county to open up Isla Blanca Park. You're familiar with Isla Blanca Park? They're not allowing people to go in, but yet they if you've got a rental space there, you're free to come in and go to the beach. But they're not allowing regular folks, to not non-residents, I guess, that don't have an RV slip to not go in. So, it's unfortunate, but I think that was mishandled.
Gotcha. Getting kind of close to the end of the time here. I want to ask you a few kind of final questions. You have your own CPA firm in Brownsville. You're a CPA. What kind of clients do you have? What kind of matters do you handle? And what kind of advice would you give to entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs in Texas, starting their own business?
Well, the first thing, our firm, we're not allowed to say that we're experts in anything, that we specialize. It's probably kind of going to the edge. But our focus is on governmental audits. We do a lot of school districts. We do cities, we do counties, we do water districts, irrigation districts, drainage districts. That really is where our forte is. We don't do a lot of private industry. And today I'm kind of glad, because a lot of the private industries, whether it's car dealerships or furniture stores, whatever, that other firms have done, have had to curtail getting audits done because they have no customers because of the shutdown. So governments will always need an audit. So right now we're in a crunch because a lot of the school districts that we do are deferring getting started. So we're going to have a lot of school districts to do within a very small period of time. So I've got a staff of 11 auditors, 10 auditors, and we're going to be very, very busy, working 50, 60 hours a week for the next 4 or 5 months. In terms of setting up business, just make sure that I tell doctor clients and lawyers, don't practice accounting. And I promise not to practice medicine without a license or practice law without a license. Sometimes they believe because they're, they can do certain things, they might be able to, cure, do brain surgery, but they don't know how to fill out a tax return. So I ask them, look, let the experts do it. Go to a CPA firm, to help you. Go to an attorney to do your filings, whether it's a liability company or partnership or corporate. I don't do that. I chose not to do that. Anybody can do it online. It's not that difficult, but I would prefer spending a little bit of money and going to people that do it. Seek out lawyers that do that kind of work. You're not going to go to a corporate lawyer that try to help you in family matters or setting up a trust or defending you in court. You have lawyers that want to be all things to all people, but I would select the lawyer that has a specialty, whether it's in criminal defense or just defense work or family law versus that. Do your paperwork, do it right, and do all your filings properly. And just do business the right way and, stay current with your taxes and you shouldn't have any problems.
Good stuff. Final question for you. What is your favorite restaurant in Austin, Texas?
I've got a lot of ones that I like to eat. True Luxe downtown is probably my favorite restaurant. I've been there so many times, when they know you they know who you are. It's kind of cool. Yeah. It took a while to do that, but knowing the head guy and knowing a lot of the wait staff, you always try to get the same ones. They put you at the same table. But True Luxe, if it's a fancy restaurant, that's where I'd like to go. Terry's for barbecue is also very, very good. I think there's another one, the Pearl, I think is pretty good too.
Okay.
I think it's Pearl, but I think my favorite restaurant is got to be True Luxe downtown. I've never been to the one up north, but the one downtown, when my daughter that lives there goes every now and then, and they even know who she is. And so she's all happy, but that's a restaurant that I would, if given a choice, that's where I would go. Given a choice. Second would probably be Fleming's.
Fleming's is good. Touring around Texas, were you able to try out different Texas barbecue on the road?
I did, but I tell you, I find this interesting for those folks that travel along the border. I wrote something up one day, and this is not to offend anybody, but and I don't think anybody really thinks this, but there might be some in the audience that do. Not all Hispanics are alike. Not all Hispanics think alike. Not all Hispanics vote alike. And not all Hispanics like the same food. I can't eat really spicy food. People say, what do you mean? What do you mean? I can't. It really bothers me. But I found that I use the example, Hispanics are different. I mean, they're even within our own Hispanic culture, we have so many differences. If you have an enchilada in Brownsville, it's going to taste different than an enchilada in El Paso.
That's true.
The spices are different. They may use more of something somewhere. They're just different. The only consistent food I've ever had is Whataburger. No matter where you go, Whataburger always stays the same, but everywhere else, I mean, it's a food, the foods are different. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mr. Carlos Cascos, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I wish we had several more hours to talk about everything you did as Secretary of State and you're involved in, but I appreciate you taking time to visit with us and talk on the podcast, and hope to have you back sometime. Yeah, invite me anytime. Make the time to do it. I think these are fun. I think it's a way to not only educate folks, but kind of throw a little bit of humor into what life is about when you're in politics at that level. And I just think it's one piece of advice. I don't know if it's changed now, but if you're driving from Austin to San Angelo, be prepared to be without cell phone service for at least an hour to an hour and a half. It's pretty desolate out there. That's true. Good advice. It's a great community, though. And San Angelo is a great city. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. All right. You say well. Say hello to the family. Will do. Thank you. This episode is brought to you by our affiliate Gemini. Gemini is a well-respected cryptocurrency exchange started by Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss. If you're interested in purchasing Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other altcoins, please check out their website at gemini.sjv.io/Moontower to learn all about it. Thank you.